Hello and welcome. I'm here to introduce a storytelling project that was recently completed by Battlefords Regional Truth and Reconciliation. I would first like to acknowledge that all activities for this project took place on Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis. This group began with casual conversations between friends and colleagues about the need for reconciliation. It grew to include people from the business community, the RCMP, human service agencies, First Nations bands, and the Métis Nation. Battlefords Regional Truth and Reconciliation has organized a number of events for people to learn about each other and begin the process of reconciliation. One of those events is storytelling. They've been working on a project that will highlight a number of storytellers. This program will give you short clips from each of them, and this YouTube channel will have each video in its complete format. We are pleased to have an introduction and short story from Saskatchewan's Lieutenant Governor, Russell Morasti. He grew up on a reserve near La Ronge and tells us about animals he encountered.
Good day, Tansi. Kita tamaskat na orang kita. Kaya no apa tabi goma iwaran to tabi tachamoins. I first want to acknowledge the Battlefords Region Truth and Reconciliation Group for this initiative, and also want to thank them for inviting me to participate. I grew up on the reserve near La Ronge, Saskatchewan, and I grew up listening to many stories, particularly from elders who would visit and tell stories about themselves or other people, what they'd done in the past, what they've observed, sometimes hunting stories, fishing stories, and the like. We don't have written history, or did not have written history until recently. And so everything that we learned about ourselves and our people, our ancestors, was through stories. And so the telling of stories was and continues to be very important to us. During difficult times, we tend to gravitate to what makes us feel good and safe, what gives us strength, hope, and resilience. For me and my family, it is our connection to nature and the outdoors and everything that comes with that. We spend a lot of time in the outdoors, usually in some sort of physical activity, whether it's hiking, running, snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, canoeing, and berry picking, particularly in the fall. These activities are enhanced by how we interact with nature and the animals that we see. Some of these animals are very visible and always around, and sometimes can never get rid of them, it seems. These include birds like the ravens, kakagawag, as we call them, who actually speak in many different ways. And I say speak because it really does sound like they're talking to us. And others who are more seasonal, such as the crows and eagles, whiskey jacks, ospreys, and many other birds. Then there are the other animals that we see quite often, such as muskrats and beavers, moose, wolves, coyotes, bears, otters, weasels, and others. Some of these animals we see quite often. They're just there all the time and are obviously very comfortable being close to humans. Others are very elusive, such as the wolves and the otters. And the otters especially, I've grown to admire and really appreciate. There's just something about otters and their behavior that just makes me feel good. We see them often in the summertime, and they're usually in family groups, swimming along, diving around each other, almost playing, it seems, at least to me. And in the wintertime, we don't see them as much, but we certainly see their tracks. And they're very unique in terms of how they travel across the ice and snow. They will actually run along and then slide along on their chest and belly, going for several feet before they have to get up and run again and slide again, traveling very efficiently on the surface of the snow and the ice. And it's a very efficient way of traveling, obviously, but I believe as well that they're having fun doing it. They often do this right alongside our ski tracks. We do a lot of skiing on the lake and leave our tracks behind. And the next day when we go back, we can see where they've traveled along our ski tracks or sometimes right in the ski track that we've left. I think it's a little bit easier for them because the snow is kind of hard packed where we've already skied. They will go for several kilometers in this manner until they disappear into a hole in the ice or into a den along the shoreline. I've even seen where they will climb up on a bank along the shoreline and slide down to the ice several times before moving on. And I can't think of any other reason that they would do that except to have a little bit of fun. And yes, we have seen many otter tracks, and we can think about what they're doing, where they're going, why they travel in this way. But it wasn't until recently that I actually witnessed two of them traveling across the ice in this manner. What an amazing sight to witness. I took it as a gift because it's not very often that people are able to witness this activity. But my patience obviously paid off. I often imagine what it would be like to be skiing and having the otter traveling, sliding right alongside me. But that's probably unlikely. Maybe. One can only hope. So I'll keep trying. A close friend of mine calls being out in nature, enjoying nature and all it has to offer, including seeing the animals out there and how we interact with them, as good medicine. And I truly believe that this is so.
Our next storyteller is Janelle Pewapsconias from Little Pine First Nation. She gives us her ideas on the importance of stories.
Danse, and hello everyone. My name is Janelle Pewapsconias. Gigawinawaski nitsigasun. Menaikosis mina waskijuse niaote. I come from Little Pine First Nation over the hill. And that is about 45 minutes west of here, of North Battlefords, Saskatchewan. And I am a spoken word artist. I am kind of like the first generation university graduate out of my family. I'm also a mother to one beautiful 9-year-old, almost 10-year-old son. And I just moved back to my home community of Little Pine First Nation about 2 years ago. And today I wanted to share a little bit about story. Little S story and big S story, and why story is important, and why story has been so important to me, and how it's been really important to understand story and where it comes from. And breaking it down even to words and what words mean and where they come from is very important. And so today I kind of wanted to speak more about, my understanding of story and how important it is. And just like this video we are viewing today, this is a story. It's a narrative. It's an unfolding of what has happened within COVID times, within a pandemic, within 2020 and 2021. And this day and age, politically, sociologically, et cetera, et cetera. So where do I begin? Let me talk to you a little bit about myself then. I grew up in Little Pine First Nation, like I said, about 45 minutes west of here. I was in my home community until I was about 18 years old. And when I was 18, I graduated from high school in Cutknife. And I am the oldest of 4 siblings. And so being the oldest and having the most experience out of my family, I wanted to get out in the world. I was raised to think that I can do anything. I was raised to think that no matter where I come from, no matter how hard it is, no matter the story, if I tried really hard to achieve anything, I can do what I wanted to, if it happens that way. And so when I went to university, I thought it was really important for me to get a really high-paying job. I thought it was really important for me to succeed and to overcome adversity, because that was the story I told myself as a young Nehiyahu or Indigenous person, was that is the only way that I'm of value. So that's the layer under the story that I was raised to believe, is it's either I could be a stereotype or I could overcome adversity and succeed. There's not a lot of stories that I knew of back then that I could do. And so those are the stories that I grew up thinking that I could do. And so when I went into engineering for those 2 years, I found it really challenging. I found it really hard to try to continue learning. I found it really hard to not only go through university as pretty much one of the only Indigenous peoples in my program, let alone the college, to be so far away from my family and disconnection to our stories and support was really hard. And so that was kind of the pause on my story in university for then. I took some time to figure out what I wanted. I took some time to look back at who I was and what are the stories that helped form who I was. And that was a really huge learning curve for me, because I went to school reading a lot of textbooks. You know, you have to have a certain grade point average to go into those kinds of colleges. Not only that, I read a lot of Canadian literature, not necessarily Indigenous literature. So those were the kinds of stories that helped, or maybe put blinders on to other content. So in those years that I took off university after that was filled with healing stories, was when the residential school commission and the whole process started to come out. And that was the very first time that I learned part of my story was that my parents were part of the residential school system, as well as their family members, as well as the community I was from. And being parts of those stories kind of unfolded into the world that it formed today. And I was thinking, well, what about those two stories that I've been told my whole life? Stereotype or overcoming adversity, where do I fit in that? So it added another narrative to understanding this world that I live in. And that's when I learned about resilience. And the story of resilience is having perhaps some hard, traumatic, life-altering experiences that happen to you. And not only has that happened to you, you've taken that and strengthened yourself to become more. But what I didn't realize about the story of resilience is that it eliminates the reality of what has happened to you, that you're more than just overcoming, that resiliency isn't something that's necessarily what we should be striving for. And there's a lot of story that comes to me realizing that. Long story short, I used part of that time to realize what other stories were out there, what were the stories that helped formed who I thought I was, and what kind of story do I want now? Because I can't go back, and no one can go back and change the past. But we can learn about it. But we can understand the systems and the people in those decision-making powers and those biases and understandings of the world that helped form the world back then, so that we don't perpetuate them and create harm in the future. So history is important in the story of the unfolding of today.
Thank you, Janelle. Your words give us a different perspective about personal expectations. Next, we have Gladys Favel from Poundmaker First Nation.
I'd like to say hello to everybody, and I'm glad to be here. And my name is Gladys Favel, and I'm from the Poundmaker Cree Nation. maybe what I should tell is about my grandfather. His name was Tom Favel, and he was the chief for Thon Acre Cree Nation for 33 years. And he's the one that introduced me to work with because before this is 1967 when we first when the reserve first opened to introduce the election process to Pond Acre Band, and my grandfather asked me to work with him on the first polling station in Pond Acre Band in 1967 April, but I don't know exactly what day. April 67 anyway. And from then on I worked helped with lots of elections. I worked with different polling stations all over. I even worked here in Battleford, North Battleford, Sweetgrass, and I worked a lot. I did a lot of that kind of work in Pound Acre from that till I retired. I worked for the band. I started working for the band in 1974. I worked as a teacher aide for 4 years when I started. I worked with kindergarten and nursery students. And then after that, I got hired to work for the band, and I worked as a band secretary for about 15 years. And then after that, they put me in a different program, and I worked as an Indian registry administrator. After that, for another maybe 15 or 16 years, and I used to help a lot too. I did lots of typing, and I worked with the computer. They brought a computer into my office, and I looked at it, and I was scared of it. I didn't want to touch it because I never worked with a computer. And then he told me, "You're going to learn how to run this, Gladys. You just practice on it." And I did, and I got to be good at that too. Everything every work I did my best all the time. The man I was talking about, my grandfather, went to residential school, and my dad went to residential school. My dad was my grandfather's first wife. They only had my dad, and when my dad was 3 months old, his mother passed away. So my dad was put in a residential school when he was 3 years old. So my dad didn't really know anything. He wasn't informed anything about Indian culture. So that's why I wasn't informed on that. But then the man that I lived with, my kid's dad, was really cultural. That's where I learned some Indian culture. But from my parents, I didn't learn very much from my grandfather. And Indian culture is something I'm interested in now, and I know it's good for our young people to try and keep their language and their Indian culture. But the Indian language disappeared when my daughter here, that's sitting here, was a little girl. When she started school, she knew Cree. She talked only Cree before she went to school. And as soon as she started school, she went to a cut knife school. And then she just started talking English from there. I couldn't do anything because that's all they learned. That's how they lost their native language. All the young people around her age, they started on that. And maybe it was sort of my fault too that she didn't keep her language. Like, I thought that she had to speak English in order to be like she was in a white school, white people's school, and I thought that's what she had to learn, was to learn how to speak English. So all my kids that went to school lost their language. None of them speak Cree now. And I guess I didn't really support the cultural part, because I spoke English most of the time I was working. When I was answering phones for 15 or 16 years, all I did was talk English. So it seems that's a language that I favor. Like, I like speaking English. Because when I talk Cree, my grandkids and my great-grandkids laugh at me because they can't understand what I'm saying. So it's hard to keep the Indian language nowadays, because all the kids, the young people, have lost their Indian language, and it's hard. It's only us old people don't understand our language and speak it. When I went to school, I never went to residential school. That was I guess a good part of my life. We had a residential school where all the kids from Poundacre used to go to the Delmas residential school. But when I was 6 years old, that following fall, I was supposed to go to residential school, and the school burnt down. So I never went to residential school. And I didn't go to school till I was close to 9 years old, because we didn't have a school on the reserve. It was being built, but they didn't finish building the Poundacre Day School. It's still standing, that school where I started school in 1949. It's still there, it's still standing, but they use it for different functions. Like, they used to use it as a dance hall, meetings, anything like it, but it's still there. It's still in good condition. The day school, Poundacre, the first Poundacre Day School. And that's the only school I attended, was Poundacre Day School on the reserve. And when I started high school, I went to a convent here in Battleford. That's the nuns, run by the nuns, because there was two convents. There was one convent in Battleford and one in North Battleford, and I went to the one in Battleford. That's where I took my high school, grade 9 to grade 12. And I took 3 years of university classes. I wanted to be a teacher, but I couldn't, I couldn't go to the right school, I guess. And I just stayed home, and I started having children. And I love my children. I had 3 sons and 1 daughter. My oldest son, I lost my oldest son. But that's the reason why I guess I'm sitting here and not doing any cultural stuff. Like, I go to feasts. I like going to feasts, and I put at feasts too. That stuff, but the Sundance ceremonies, I don't participate in those, because I never learned how. I never learned, because my mother and father weren't really into that. Like, my dad was already probably lost his culture. My dad was a hard worker, because he was a farmer. He farmed his own land, and since I was the middle person in our family, like, there was 9 of us. There was my brother, that's Pauline's dad. He was the oldest one. And then I had the youngest brother. He was the youngest one, and 7 of us girls in between, and I'm the middle one. So when my brother was gone, he went to work. He went to work in other places. And then my dad didn't have any health in his when he was working in the fields, and I pitied him, so he didn't tell me to work. I just told him I want to help you because you don't have any help. So I worked as a man, like when I was young. And my two younger sisters were the cooks with my mom. They used to do the cooking, and me, I didn't really learn how to cook. I still don't know how to cook. But I worked hard as a man. Like I was strong enough, I guess, to do that kind of work.
Thank you, Gladys. We are honored to have the words of an elder to guide us. Next, we will hear from Brenda Nabe Martin, a Métis woman who currently lives in the Battlefords.
My name is Brenda Nabe Martin. I am a proud Métis woman. I love my heritage, and today I want to talk about being a Métis woman in the trying times of COVID. I know that COVID is real. We all struggle. But on the positive note for me, it has really given me the opportunity to bring out the things that I learned growing up as a Métis girl. I grew up living with my grandparents and my extended family, which did all the things that Métis people do in their culture. It's a way of living. I love to cook, I love to hunt, I love picking berries. But during COVID, I think one of the main things is that I've really discovered that being set back and not being able to go out and do things where I can be shopping or out sightseeing, it's brought me back to my home base and really to my roots, where I'm looking back and saying, oh, I know this, I've learned this, I really don't need to get out anywhere away from my home to make myself happy, to be so busy. I'm so busy with things that I've got to do at home for other people, for my family. Quite often I'll do some baking or some sewing, and I drop it off in a safe manner to other people that are in need. And that gives my heart happiness. Just being able to share and to teach my kids, teach my children. I've been very lucky to be gifted with 4 children, which I pray for daily. I pray for everybody, which is another thing that I learned growing up too, that our Creator, God, is a part of us. And giving thanks to Him is one of the great blessings that I learned from my family. I've joined groups through social media where there's no contact, because it's there again on the computer, where we share our activities that we are doing, or we share our language. One of the things that our language is, it's called Michif, and it's a lost language, but it's making a comeback, as well as being happy and proud of being the Métis people that we are, and sharing that culture, that way of life. I have many friends that don't even know, how do you pick berries, or what do you do with them when you pick them? Well, I have got blueberries in my freezer right now that I've taken out, cooked up, and shared them with others. My children come over and they love it. One of them said to her dad, she said, "Dad, you don't have to buy jam in the store. You know that Nana will make it, and it's better." So those kinds of things are so happy to my heart to hear them, that they are actually learning from experience of what I'm doing, even though I don't realize that I'm always teaching them. As I learned from my parents, I hunted, I trapped when I was just maybe 8 years old. I started trapping, and I remember now looking back thinking, oh, when I can get out of here, I hate skinning. I had a little trap line where I used to trap weasels, and they stunk so bad. But now that experience, when I'm out and about, I see tracks in the snow, and it's like, I got to stop and look at this. Or going for a drive, I spotted a white owl the other day, and it was just amazing. Or another owl or bird nest, those kinds of things that I believe are installed from me from when I grew up with the Métis heritage that I have.
Thank you, Brenda. Lindsay Eekwol Knight is our next storyteller. She is originally from Muscogee First Nation and is well known as a hip-hop artist. She sings a song she wrote for her son.
And then I became a mom, and that was like, I was sort of like this, and it just went flip. And becoming a parent means that everything in your world is no longer about you. It's about that little being that exists. And from that moment, becoming a mom, I realized now I have to make sure that I'm coming from a place that makes sure that this baby, this generation is aware of this history, but also compassionate, and also feeling good about themselves, and also coming from a place of kindness and compassion. And I can no longer be as angry as I used to be, because I have this little person, this little human, this little spirit that I have to take care of and teach them in a good way. So that became the next step of my journey. And I'll admit, parenthood, just getting into it, and it was a shock to the system. It was really hard, and I struggled. And when I feel like I'm struggling, I write music, and that's the first thing I do. So what I want to quickly do is maybe share the song that I wrote for my son. His name is Kisik, and when he was born, I started to write for him. And I realized that every piece that I write now has to be something that I imagine him listening to in the future and being okay with it. So I can't write, I can't throw a bunch of curse words in there anymore. I can't, rap about partying and clubs and that. Not that I really did, but now I have to always think about these kids as they're older. I have a daughter now, but I'll get into that in a second. So this is Kisik's song, and I'm going to share it with you because it was the time in my life when I became a mom and started writing for my kids. Nickel sis, napisum, light up the sky, heart beat like a drum. Grab hold of the world, my son. You are the one. Nickel sis, napisum, light up the sky, heart beat like a drum. Grab hold of the world, my son. You are the one. And no, I never thought of love like this. Right down to my very last cell it exists. Call it what you want, like maternal instinct. I'm based on intuition, a new way to think. Everything I am, I give to you. Everything I have, I'll share with you. There's a lot of things you're not gonna learn about at school, so I'll be there to protect you from it all if that's cool. Had your back since you sat in my womb, and I'll keep that up till my name's on a tomb. But don't get me wrong, I won't make your life easy. I'll help with your strength, cause you'll need it. Believe me, they're out there everywhere. Haters in the game, players. Keep your eyes open and your mind full of good prayers. And that's another thing I won't tell you to believe. Just know when you listen to the wind in the trees, or the birds in the breeze. Be proud, nickel sis, let your story unfold. Your ancestors' footprints on this land are so old. And when you grow up, you're gonna be something important. But either way, you can live with mom and dad until you're 40. You're such a mama's boy, all quick with a charm. I was so hooked I had to get you tatted on my arm. And even though your greatness outweighs the rest, don't act better than your own or you'll end up with less. Be critical, original, a caring individual. Focus on the truth, don't fall into a pigeonhole. Be strong, be aware, be resilient. My son, you're my son, shine that light so brilliant. Be strong, be aware, be resilient. My son, you're my son, shine that light so brilliant. Nickel sis, napisum, light up the sky, heart beat like a drum. Grab hold of the world, my son. You are the one. Nickel sis, napisum, light up the sky, heart beat like a drum. Grab hold of the world, my son. You are the one.
Thank you, Lindsay. Our next clip is from Daphie Pooyak, a Nakota Cree spiritualist.
So my English name is Daphie Pooyak, and I have 3 traditional names. The first name is Keheusko, The second name is Ugamau Mikapiasusko, and the third one Ukitsitausko. Kehausko means eagle woman. Ugamau Mikapiasusko, it means leading red thunderbird woman. And Ukitsitausko is warrior woman, helper of the lodges. So I am 3 parts Nakota, 1 part Cree, and a little bit Ukrainian. And my mom's name is Jean Blossom Pooyak, her married name, and her parents are William Spyglass and Helen Burt. And on my dad's side, David Pooyak, he's passed on now, and his parents were Emily Mayo and Solomon Pooyak. So I grew up in Sweetgrass First Nation. They call it Nagawatsi, and it's known for one of our beautiful sacred sites. I'm grateful to be here today. I think in this time, there's a lot of people that are sitting still. And for the first time in a long time, people think like, oh, the COVID, the world shut down. But for the first time in a very long time, people actually have time for themselves. So, but that's very difficult because a lot of people were so busy in their lives and their lives were consumed by someone else, something else, their work, their job, taking care of their kids. And in all of that busyness, people forget about themselves. They forget about their own wants and their own needs. So when somebody is in a position where they have to sit still, a lot of things start to come up, old things that they weren't taking care of, which is a really good thing. It's a beautiful thing to work on improving ourselves. And it's a beautiful thing to work on healing and wellness. But also, we are also in a time where we can't share or very much, or we can't find a lot of outlets. But the important thing, growing up, my dad and my kukam, they talked a lot about the sole purpose of our journey as human beings. And my dad told me that our purpose in this life, in this world, is to have unconditional love for all life, all people.
Thank you, Daphie. Up next is author, professor, and storyteller Randy Morin from Big River First Nation. In this clip, he talks about where he is now in his life.
And there, again, Randy, University of Saskatchewan, for the last 20 years, I've been looking for somebody, with the right credentials. Can you come and check it out? So I said goodbye to the Catholic School Division and I made my way to the University of Saskatchewan, Department of Indigenous Studies. And so I've been there now for the last 4 years, my 4th year. So so I'm continuing my role as a language and culture activist, So I go around speaking, I go around telling my stories I heard growing up, and it's an honor to be called a storyteller, So it's been an amazing journey for me in so many ways, from finding out my true self, finding my happiness and my peace. It's been a journey of trying to find my true self, and it's still a journey. It is still a journey. There's still so many good opportunities. I'm a published author now. My 3rd book will be coming out probably within a month or 2, with a 4th book shortly following that, and then a 5th book, right? So, being an author is it's pretty cool. I've also been an actor, like I said, I was an actor, so I was doing all these plays and, it was pretty cool. That's where I found my voice and talking to, it really helped me in my role as an educator to project my voice and, to act and, and so I was also an entrepreneur for many years, we started up some businesses, I became a salesman, it was just like trying to find out who I really am. And I think I'm pretty happy, although life is still going, you know, I still don't know where I'm going to be. You know, it's always taking it day by day and being grateful, right? And just learning to visualize and learning to work on my own happiness, balancing my inner medicine wheel, right? So, but I really attribute my ancestors, my grandparents, my parents, my community. I'm going to move back to my community. I left there in 96. 1996 is when I moved out of my community. And I never went. I go back a lot, but I want to go back. There's a lot of changes that need to happen in my community, right? And so I'm going to do all the things I've learned in my worldly travels. I've been all over the world, met amazing people, done amazing things. And I believe I can help my community a little bit, right? Especially in the health, in a health, aspect part. Because I'm an avid runner. I'm an avid walker, biker, hiker. I'm always outside, even when it's minus 30, I'm outside, right? So there's a lot of stuff I want to do with my community. I'm excited to try things out. But yeah, getting people back, the young people back into the culture is a passion of mine, yeah. So I got lots of stories. I've seen UFOs, I've seen cryptids, I've seen ghosts, In fact, my 5th book is going to be about everything I've done. Near-death misses, oh, you name it, It's been pretty cool. It's been quite a ride for me, and it's quite an honor.
Thank you, Randy. Our next clip is from a well-known Sweetgrass First Nation artist, Darwin Atcheynum.
Good afternoon. My name is Darwin Atcheynum. I am from Sweetgrass First Nations, and today I'm going to talk to you about a little bit of the history about the stuff I make, and then the cultural history about why I have the certain items here, and then how it was passed on to me. Before I start, I was presented with some tobacco so I can trade this for some stories that I have here. Because in our culture, before we start anything, we always have tobacco to trade for things. Even if I go see the elders and ask them for advice or something like that, or ask them for anything like that, they'll put their hand out and they'll say, "You know better." And I say, "Oh no, I forgot my tobacco." So now, in all my vehicles, I always have a pouch of tobacco in my SUVs and in the cars. In case I find even a hawk on the side of the road that's been run over, I just don't go pick it up, because there's no balance from taking and taking. You always got to give back. So I always have the tobacco in there for a trade on there. So even if nobody sees me out there, they don't have to see you. He sees you. So all my stuff that I do at home, I start everything off with a prayer. Every morning, it starts off with a prayer. I give thanks to the Creator for giving us another beautiful day, and then for thanking Him for yesterday, I had another beautiful day. So, and I don't thank just for myself, and I ask for other people, my family, my friends, the fellow people in hospitals and stuff like that, to be well, for whatever they're suffering from, for addictions or their sicknesses. I ask for everybody to, for everything to go good. So that's one of the things that I have my tobacco for, and all the stuff that I start with at home, my artwork, I always start with tobacco before I pray for everything, to give thanks and to ask the Creator to help me to work through my hands to bring out the beauty of what's hiding in the things that I'm going to make. And years ago, when I started working with my hands out here, there was 15 us kids that lived at home, and plus we kept a bunch of adopted kids that are from broken homes. So we had all these kids out there, and then my dad had a small farm back then. He had a big farm when he retired, but you got to start somewhere. And when he started, it was a small farm, just a little tractor with an 8-foot cultivator in the back, and he ended up with about a 60-foot cultivator and a bunch of granaries and about 4 combines and stuff. He farmed really big at the end of his career, but then he worked hard for it, and that was him that worked for it, and that's where we learned to do all our work ethics, was from him.
Thank you, Darwin. And thank you, once again, to all of our storytellers for taking part in this project. We want to maintain our personal connections even though we can't meet in person right now. And thank you for watching. We put together these clips to give you an idea of the stories that each person shared with us. I hope you enjoyed our storytellers and will spend some time watching the full versions of all of the videos. They are listed to the right of your screen. Battlefords Regional Truth and Reconciliation Steering Committee will be planning more activities in 2021. They will be promoted through our local media and social media channels.